Well, I just hit the go live button, so we should be live in a moment. There we go. We just popped up on Twitch. So hello everybody. This is going to be a vodcast talking about the future of education. I am one of your three hosts. My name is Joseph Bensley. I work at Windsor Mill Middle School. I've been a teacher for, I guess 5 years now. I came in halfway through the year, so it's kind of hard to keep track of that sometimes. But I will now let my other two hosts introduce themselves. Ladies?
I'll go ahead and start, or go second, I guess. I'm Catherine Mackey. I am a high school teacher at Owings Mills High. This is probably my fourth year teaching. Um, Time has been moving pretty quickly.
I'm Kelsey George. I am also a teacher at Windsor Mill Middle School. I've been teaching a total of 7 years, but 6 years specifically at Windsor Mill. And all of our schools are in Baltimore County.
Really quickly, what contents do we teach? Because I know we have an array.
Social studies.
Math.
And I am English special ed, so got a
Definitely.
good array of contents, some different grades going on in two different schools. So we're semi-diverse in our knowledge that we're bringing to the table. Um, awesome. All right.
All right. Well, so
So,
this vodcast, it was inspired by the Silver Lining for Learning. So each of our members watched at least one or two episodes of this Silver Lining for Learning. Funny thing is, even out of 35 or 36 episodes, it turns out that two of us ended up watching the same second episode, being episode 29. We'll touch on that shortly. So we're gonna start off and let's see, Miss Mackey. Let's come to you first.
sure.
What was something that you learned from the Silver Lining from Learning podcast?
Yes. So, in the first episode of the Silver Linings podcast, I really fell in love with this concept of the opportunity of crisis. In Chinese, apparently, there is the word for crisis, which is wei ji. Hopefully, I've pronounced that correctly. Don't speak Chinese. But wei ji, separated, wei, I believe, means crisis, and ji stands for opportunity. So their word for crisis is literally the opportunity of crisis. And it's this idea that as crises occur, there are opportunities for growth and change that arise due to the challenges and the struggles. And I think that that is just a really wonderful idea and would be like a huge mindset shift if we as teachers in Baltimore County, but I think in maybe America as a whole, sort of took that idea of opportunity, that this pandemic is an opportunity for change and for conversation and for um, a new mindset.
I definitely want to talk on that because I agree. I feel like within Baltimore County, at least, it feels like we're still trying to fit normal school into this time that we've never experienced before. And I get that it might be for like consistency, but like you were saying, this could be an opportunity to rethink education as a whole and really see what can we do in this new environment, even though it's different. And again, a crisis, what positives can we pull out of it, especially for our kids and how every kid is having varying scenarios and situations in this virtual learning.
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with both of you here. I think now is a great time for us to hit the proverbial reset button on education. I think if you talk to many teachers, I know we talked about this in previous meetings, that a lot of professions might get offended if you said that their profession is broken, so to say. But teachers don't have that. We kind of recognize that education isn't, it's not what it's supposed to be right now. So in this crisis, we could easily say, all right, everything's already reset. Let's do it better when we come back and as we're moving forward. So I totally agree that we should take that concept of Weiji into perspective there. So thank you.
And I think that's sort of why we are doing this almost in the first place, is being inspired by the conversation that the Silver Linings Vodcast people have, being inspired to have our own conversation. So if you're watching us right now, we strongly suggest you finish watching our video, but you also head over to silverliningforlearning.org to check out the OG sort of original podcast about this. But I'm curious, what stood out to you guys in the podcast?
Because it kind of ties to what Catherine was saying in terms of opportunity. And we're going to get more into it as we dive into our discussion a little bit. But the one thing that really kind of stood out to me as a teacher is I was so focused on my own school that I didn't, and the equity in my own school, that I didn't think about it like big picture, and how access to technology and support in that is going to create that divide, the digital divide. And we discussed this as well, that it's not just about access to materials either, it's access to understanding and participation with technology. And as our students lack access to technology, they will fall behind in the participation and the understanding, and again creating more of a divide between socioeconomic groups. And that's something that is very concerning right now, especially as Baltimore County is experiencing ransomware, where now our county is losing time with our students, and that could have really big academic repercussions down the line compared to other counties, other parts of the world and the country.
That's a great point to bring up. I know in our voice thread conversation that we had, one of the things that I brought up was how difficult online learning can be for certain students. I feel like some students are really embracing it, but for some students they're really struggling, and that difficulty is very discouraging, and it just makes them not want to do it. So those students who don't have equitable access, who now, hey, you didn't have a computer for the first 4 weeks of school, well, now you need to make all that work up. So it's just that much harder for those students who are at a disadvantage.
Yeah, I totally with both of you on this, and I think we're definitely going to delve deeper into this probably later as we get into some of our focused questions that we came up with. But yes, really, really important to talk about that divide and the equity involved for sure.
So perfect. Well, next I'll mention my inspiration from this podcast. I had a couple things. The first was using social media with students. I know we had just we mentioned it a few moments ago, but my GT students have created their own class Discord. So each class has their own Discord page where they collaborate with each other, where they just kind of get together, they talk, they heckle each other occasionally. But knowing this, I thought to myself a couple weeks ago that, all right, let's let them have their space to be kids, and let's let them do this. Hey, we didn't create this resource as teachers. They were resourceful enough to create this on their own. So that's really good for them. But then once this ransomware hit, I was definitely kicking myself, and then listening to the Silver Lining for Learning podcast, it was like, hey, we should engage students in social media where they're already at. It's like, well, they're already on Discord. I could have very easily hopped onto there and just said, hey guys, no school today, and avoided a handful of phone calls and messages, that sort of stuff. So definitely something that made me think was definitely talking about social media. And in the 29th episode, hearing the perspective of the students, I think was the most powerful thing that I really took from this whole podcast. And there was an idea of making our schools either, there's like a continuum of schools. I think it was Chris Dede, he was a Harvard professor. He said you're either a school that focuses on testing, or you're a school that has more of a love for learning. And I feel like in a time when testing has been essentially nixed, we've said there's no standardized testing, why are we not trying to breed more of a love of learning?
And I think that's awesome. And I think it goes right back to what Catherine started us off with of Weiji, of why not take this time to create something new. Like, we're being forced to. So why fight it instead of embracing it and taking the time to switch how we teach from here's a test to here's what you should understand about the world around you, and like learn to love or love to learn. Either way that goes. So I love what you found, especially when talking to the students. Their perspective, I think, was very interesting when it comes to technology as well.
Absolutely. And I'm definitely going to want to touch on that 29th episode later. But I think as we're talking about shifting education, it's a nice transition to shift our slide into our, first focus question, first topic, and sort of look at what equity issues have been made really apparent by the pandemic, by this global issue crisis. What are we seeing in Baltimore County specifically?
So I definitely wanted to start the conversation because I kind of touched on it in that first part when we talked about silver lining, and just accessibility to technology is so varied. In Baltimore County, if we look specifically at our county, varies greatly when it comes to socioeconomic. You have very rich parts of our country, and you have very poor parts of our country, or not our country, our county. Um, and therefore, our children have different access to different things. And specifically talking about Windsor Mill, we've had students that have gone weeks without hotspots or weeks without a working device. And like Joe was saying, what's the expectation at that point for them coming in 4 weeks late and you missed a whole month of school, is creating that equity issue of how can these children be equal in their access to education when it's so obviously not. And we're seeing it play out right now in front of our eyes. And as teachers, it's been, for me personally, it's been hard because there's not much we can do at our levels for them. But you see the divide happening as parts of our county progress and continue to progress, while other parts of our county continue to fall behind. And you see that in our data, and you see that in access to resources.
Yeah, speaking for Owings Mills, we 100% have students without laptops, have 100% had students without internet access. And actually, it was a large percentage of our students, our ESOL students, that didn't have access to internet and needed hotspots. I think we're on like our third shipment so far this school year. We keep running out.
Wow.
So being an ESOL magnet is a very interesting sort of equity conversation because our school is all about focusing on helping ESOL students, acclimate to American education and get their language skills up and get their reading skills up and supporting them through that process. But there are also some of our, lower socioeconomic groups. Not all of them are American citizens. They have larger families in general. A lot of my ESOL students message me saying, Miss Mackey, like, I can't come to class today. I have to take my parents to the doctor, or my grandma needs me to translate for her, or my siblings need a ride to wherever they're going, or I have a job to work because my family needs the income. And it's just, what do you say to those students? Of course, you say, absolutely, take the time you need, do what you've got to do. Like, I'm understanding of your home situation and the challenge and the stress that the pandemic is giving to you right now. But at the same time, it's like,
right,
it's already behind.
Yeah, and it's just like it's like priorities. And again, like, we're educationally in such a different environment that we again should be changing so that school can be equitable. Like, oh, you have a job, why aren't we thinking, okay, well, why some families experience this? We could change education to fit their needs rather than trying to fit them into a box. But yeah, it's completely inequitable again because of some of the stuff that our kids have to deal with. You're right. Like I have a kid, his entire family, like they all had COVID, so he was taking care of them all, and I'm over here trying to be like, yeah, but eighth grade social studies, while his family is all like sick around him, and I'm like, whew. So yeah, I completely yeah, and that's there. And you brought up other barriers as well, like ESOL and special ed and things like that. Like so, it's not even just about technology; it's about services and how do those services get met in this environment.
For sure, definitely. And in addition to that, I think we should also think back to last spring, because not only is it an equity issue that certain students didn't have devices or didn't have access in the fall, but even going back to last spring, when the paper pencil option was available, it wasn't available for 3 or 4 weeks until, after other students had already gone through that. So once again, those students with limited resources are being held back in ways that they have no control over those things. So being in an inequitable position is not only hurting them in that regard, but it's compounding to continue to kind of bring them down. So I think that's something that I've noticed from the pandemic, is that, like, if you've got it rough, it gets a lot rougher as time
Absolutely.
goes on, and it's easier to be in a good position, for sure.
Um, and I just want to take a look very quickly at some of the pandemic, the COVID data for our county. So I took this from the Maryland website yesterday, the 28th of November. So this is very recent, very our most recent to date data by sort of zip code. Um, so I circled the one at the top that circled the 19,006 cases of COVID. That's Owings Mills zip code. So my area, my school pool has 19,006 cases as of yesterday. And then the other circled section is the Windsor Mill zip code. I'm sure you guys might get pulled from some other zip codes around that area, but the Windsor Mill zip code has 15,046 cases. Um, which is high. It's not the highest. As you can see, there are some higher cases. I pulled out just a few. 2,295 cases exist in Pikesville. Um, the dark blue bottom area where it says 2,889 and 2,360. That is the Dundalk area of Baltimore County, which is known for being some of our, more impoverished areas. Versus if you look at the much lower numbers, 620 cases in Towson, which is one of our much more affluent schools areas. I believe Towson High School was one of the newer renovations for
Mm-hmm.
schools. And then I was also really astounded, or not astounded per se, but I thought a data point that was very, very interesting is that 136 cases, which is not Baltimore County, that's in the city. That is Roland Park, which is one of the most affluent areas of Baltimore City where homes go for $4 million. Um, and they have 136 cases versus the thousands of cases in the county, and which sort of really, for me, shows how the socioeconomic gap, right,
Mm-hmm.
really plays not only into the pandemic of just number of cases. Um, I can't say for sure why. Like, are they distancing better? Are they staying
Yeah.
farther away? Is it the smaller family size? I don't know, but if we're talking about equity with technology, you got to talk about money, and based off of money in sort of our area, COVID cases are higher where we are poorer.
Yeah. And that has bigger effects. It has that ripple effect of not just, oh, this is a pandemic, but when you look towards education, again, I love that you have this map because it shows data wise what our kids are dealing with when it comes to the pandemic, and it's not, and everything that encompasses is that they're seeing a lot more sick people around them. That's a lot more stress, and then again, creating now even a divide in how much our kids have to deal with, thereby impacting their educational experience, which is already hindered. And again, like Joe was saying, compounded now. Like it's just one thing after another for our students. And it just feels like that divide is growing in this virtual learning atmosphere, as we have it right now anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really like analyzing this data in my mind right now. I know we looked at it earlier, but like looking at Towson, looking and seeing how there's 620, like I recognize that's a lighter color. I also noticed that it's a smaller area, which means the density of COVID in Towson is maybe, I mean, if we compare that to like the Windsor Mill, it looks like Towson is a little bit smaller than half of the size of Windsor Mill. So what I'm thinking here is like, even though the density seems somewhat similar, you can definitely see how those more, or how those less affluent areas are impacted significantly more. And my curiosity would be, I mean, I'm someone coming from the west side, coming from like that Dundalk, Essex area. Going over to somewhere like Windsor, is that an increased risk for me right now? Like, is that just kind of having a thought there of the travel across the county? You know, I know we have a lot of teachers that'll come from like Pennsylvania and that sort of stuff. So even considering equity in that aspect, like, is it, when we're considering bringing teachers back or even having to deal with this ransomware attack, is having people come down from Pennsylvania and put them essentially into harm's way a equitable choice?
Okay, I like that, like looking towards the future,
Yeah.
of like, because eventually we will go back at some point, and are some teachers going to be able to come? So then some students are losing access to a physical teacher, and that is definitely something that could be create inequity. Um, I think we need to definitely, as educators, start looking towards the future. So I really like, Joe, that we started talking about that, because we're going to need to. And I feel like we've been very reactive during this
Hmm.
instead of
Mm-hmm.
proactive as a county. And I'm sure there's teams or something, so I don't want to step on toes, but it just feels like we're reacting to things happening to us. And we've had a few months now where we could start to be like more proactive of what is this going to look like as the next few months happen. And now the next few years, long term, if we can actually shift education somehow.
What
Um,
are the opportunities? Absolutely. Just taking it back to that wagee, um, what are the opportunities? And because we're talking about education, how are we going to use education, or not education, sorry, because we're talking about technology in education, how are we going to use technology purposefully? Um, in the Silver Linings episode 29, my favorite student comment was about how the student felt there was so much push for technology, more technology, using all the technology, but that the technology wasn't being used purposefully, that it wasn't actually leading towards learning for that student, um, which is something that we really need to think about because we have the opportunity to reevaluate and look at which technologies can be used purposefully, which technologies are going to create learning, which technologies are going to help close the divide that is so clearly evident right now.
right.
Um,
Absolutely.
Leading to our next
Yeah.
slide, thank you for switching.
Yeah.
These sort of short-term goals, strategies, thinking about the future, but not too far in the future, for both online and maybe hybrid situations.
So the reason, like, I wanted to connect what you just said because I think you're right that the kid saying that it's too much technology, like one of our short-term goals is that we need to get teachers before any of the kids, like teachers need to know how to use this technology. And I think there was a very big push in our county to use technology and not so much an emphasis on we need to teach teachers or how to use it effectively to close the divide. So I think teachers just shove technology into lessons thinking, okay, well, I put technology and therefore I can check the box of technology rather than what is the benefit of this piece of technology and how is this going to help my kids grow and really evaluate the effectiveness of technology in the classroom. And I think that needs to be a short-term goal. If for the foreseeable future, we are going to be virtual and we need to be effectively using these tools to close the divide. Like you said, that is very evident at this point.
Now, the follow-up question kind of to address that is, do you think that should be more teacher, like should it be more arbitrary to each teacher, or should it be county directed? Because I can see arguments for both, that like what works for me might not work for someone else, but telling everyone in the county like, hey, we should be using this and we should be using it effectively could also be a good strategy.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead, Kelsey, if you want.
No, Catherine, you can go.
Okay. I think it could work either way. I think there needs to be an aspect of county directive, for sure. If we look at the ransomware attack right now, there's a lack of communication and directive and sort of clarity, of expectations, which is causing a lot of people anxiety and stress and confusion and panic, during a time that is already stressful and anxiety inducing. But I think it is going to come down to teachers being, you know, aware enough and conscious enough to say, okay, the county directive says this. Um, I'm going to take one thing and really focus, because when Kelsey was talking about, picking more purposeful technology, I've learned Nearpod, I've learned Desmos, I've learned about Google Classroom, I've learned about so many different
I was about to say,
online things this school year while we've been online, but not once has anyone, then had the conversation of, this is how you use it to help your students do this skill. This is how you help your students close this gap. This is how you then translate, right? Like if Desmos is amazing in online, but it's not going to be very useful in a hybrid setting because it doesn't have a classroom element, maybe that's not what I want to focus on teaching my students right now. I'm going to want something that works online and in the classroom. Now, I'm not picking on Desmos. I haven't used Desmos. I'm an English teacher. It's kind of a math thing. I know that it could be used for English. We're working on that. But for me, I'm at a point where I've been, here's this technology, here's this technology, here's this program, here's this software, learn this, learn this, learn this. These are your options. And then my, admin come into my classroom and they're like, oh, you're using Nearpod, A+. And I'm like, just because I put it into this lesson doesn't mean that I understand it. I feel comfortable using it. I have given my kids clarity on how to use it, or I know where I'm going with it in the future.
or that the kids grew it all.
Right.
Used it doesn't mean, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm in a similar boat. I feel like we had one afternoon self-paced session where we learned how to do things like breakout groups, and it's like it would be really nice to be able to be in a PD with other teachers where I could interact with them, where I could actually play around with it, test it out. So maybe a short-term goal would be just like more teacher training, like in general. Like,
Absolutely. And teacher training that has follow-up, in my
yes,
opinion.
And
with
Uh,
purpose.
yeah, and I was about to say emphasis on like evaluating the purpose and the effectiveness. Like, because like you were saying, Catherine, like I can use Nearpod all day, every day, but if it's not doing anything, just because it's there, doesn't do anything for our kids. So I think an understanding of effective technology tools and how to use them and how to evaluate them might be something that teachers need to learn to do rather than just taking everything thrown at them and shoving it into lessons. Because the kid, like from the kid from episode 29, like the kids can see that too.
yeah,
Hmm.
And if we don't understand the technology, how are they supposed to understand the technology? And again, so digital divide is like the kids don't understand what you're doing. And I think something I wanted to mention is at Windsor Mill, something we've noticed is that a lot of our younger kids don't know how to do a lot with technology. There's an assumption that because our kids are growing up in the generation of technology, that they understand how to do simple things, and they don't. And so there needs, I think, another short-term goal or strategy would be to take an emphasis or take time to explicitly teach kids how to use technology in our classrooms. I don't know if you guys did this when you were younger. I had like a tech class, but it was like focused on computer use.
Hmm.
And I just feel like our kids don't get that anymore. And so again, creating more of a digital divide and therefore an equity divide in our county.
So something that I've been facing and a little bit of an issue with back when we had classes is the kids who get new devices get Chromebooks, and the kids from the county are familiar how to use a BCPS device. They know how to save things to their OneDrive. They know how to use Schoology and how to access it. They know how to open up Word and PowerPoint. But if you ask them to do the same thing on a Chromebook, which then uses the Google Suite, so they have to use Google Docs, they have to use, Google Slides, they have to save it to their Google Drive. Since it's a different process, they don't understand. They know how to do it in their one setting, but they can't transfer that learning to a slightly different setting. So that kind of ties along with what you were just saying, that they know what they know in technology, but as soon as they're out of their comfort zone, it makes instructing students a lot more difficult.
absolutely. And I think that there's kind of two trains of thought that my brain is like plowing ahead in both directions. So hopefully this makes sense. Um, Along the lines of making sure technology is purposeful to students, we have to communicate with students and ask them what is working and what is not. Have them be reflective and use that to, you know, influence our decisions and our thought processes. And I think having communication between ourselves and students, having communication between home and school, having communication between county and teachers and home is just a goal or something like a strategy. Just gotta keep that communication going better, more. I don't know.
Absolutely. Because kind of with this class in general, when we talked about stakeholders and like how to create change, like we have to have, like I know we in Baltimore County we have the stakeholder survey that like our kids have to do, we have to do, but like as a teacher I never see that data,
Right.
and I need to know what's working for my kids. So I think, yeah, communication, and that's been something very difficult this year in a virtual, is figuring out how everyone can communicate with me about how they're feeling with whatever's going on with technology. And I think communication is something that our county needs to work on as a whole, like especially with this ransomware thing. Like we've been without communication, and that's been an issue, and how to, yeah, gather that data of what's working and what's not. And because like we've learned, if the kids have a stake in what we're doing and they feel like they have influence and a voice, then those changes can start to occur.
So that reminds me of something that I heard in episode 29, going back to that one. The 3 students they talked to all were involved in programs where they got to more or less choose the curriculum they were in. So they could choose to take more of a paper pencil, tested route, or they could choose to go more of like a project based route. And by giving the students that opportunity to choose, it definitely engaged them more. So something that, just kind of thinking about a short-term goal, because I think that's more of a long-term goal to like overhaul the curriculum to give them that choice. The more short-term goal would be to give them choices of how to present their learning, or give them choices in how they receive the materials that they get, or just offer some type of student choice, as opposed to, here's the 5 sections of the lesson, here's the lecture, go do your show what you know.
And I think maybe that this is one place that we can praise the county for being pretty good is first quarter just kind of ended, and the option to give an I, to give an incomplete for a first quarter grade, so that students had an opportunity, if they were one of those students that didn't have access to internet, or had a family member with COVID, or had other situations going on, we, the teacher, could say, like, I'm going to give you an incomplete and allow you the month that we have, because it's 2 weeks before report cards go out from when we give the grade, and another 2 weeks. Students have 2 weeks after the report cards go out to turn in assignments. So they basically get a whole month to turn in any work, whatever work you discussed with them about showing their body of evidence that they have been learning. And this might just be an Owings Mills thing, but our school, our principal, Ms. Campbell, has been really, really wonderful with the idea that it's a body of evidence. It doesn't have to be a physical grade. If a student didn't turn in an assignment, but you had a conversation with them that shows that they were able to pick up on the learning, you're welcome to grade that discussion instead of the worksheet, and give them that grade, give them something to allow them that opportunity to be less, we are in school, you must submit an assignment. And that's definitely, like, again, maybe just our school thing, probably not county-wide, but I think the combination of looking at a body of evidence and the multiple means for showing your learning, combined with the county policy of you can have an I, you can be incomplete for right now while you work on that, is something that I've been, like, just warm and fuzzy about during the pandemic, of, being flexible and having that strategy of, like, for right now, while we're figuring it out, we're going to be flexible and give options.
So that is a policy, like, that your principal put in place for your whole school?
I don't know if it's a policy it's not like in our technology agreement, but our principal has been very clear of, like, teacher autonomy, change the curriculum. Teacher autonomy, grade the learning. Grade the learning. It can be a discussion.
Because, yeah, I've done that a few times when it's just like the kid is like, the typing it out is what's going to take the most difficult part. So I'm like, Anthony, whatever his name is, I'm like, just verbally tell it to me. And I've used that as a grade. So I'm glad to hear that other people have, because you're right, like, take down that barrier. Why does it have to be, like, create that equity? Why does it have to be written, or why does it have to be done this way when we just had the conversation? I know the kid understands it. Why couldn't that be? So I think that's an awesome policy, or an awesome idea that your school's had. And I love the question, though, of, by doing these things, putting the eyes in and giving them these different avenues, is that going to and, like, being as flexible as possible, like, oh, do you have another month to do all this stuff? Is that going to lead to undereducated children? Because that's a possibility where, okay, now the kid doesn't do it right for another month, and now they're even further, like, so
I
is there a
I see
possibility
both sides of that. Like, it's good to let the kid try and make it up, because at least then they're learning something, as opposed to just say, hey, forget about it. and then you don't learn, especially for like quarter one, which in a lot of classes are the most basic, like foundational skills. Like I'm sure even in a social studies class, like you probably start towards the beginning of the timeline. You know, in
Yep.
math, we start with like addition, multiplication, subtraction, division. So really those first quarter skills I feel are super important, and you really want to give the kids that second opportunity. But I also hear what you're saying, and if we give them another opportunity, I think for some kids that really were in an inequitable position, this is a great call. You know, for a kid like, I'm thinking of Tony in my class, who didn't have access during the spring. He didn't have access until about 3 weeks ago, and a week isn't enough time to make up all of your assignments. So giving him that month was a great call. But at the same time, when you have students who come to every class, who don't turn in the work, who don't, you know, you've called home countless times, you've let the parents know, yada yada, and you give them an extra month, they're going to see it as, oh, well, next quarter I'm going to have this extra month too. So I see it as a double-edged sword. I see it as really beneficial for those students who have equity access issues, and I see it as I don't want to use the word coddle, but like it's definitely
I see where you're going. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm going to speak for myself here. I didn't offer this to every student. I offered an eye to maybe 2 or 3 students in each of my classes who I felt deserved it due to extenuating circumstances. And when I talked to them before I gave it. I was like, hey, how do you feel about this? They agreed that this was something they were interested in and that they would take advantage of the opportunity.
I think that's also, you communicated with them though,
right.
and I think that's what's going to make it effective. Is you ask them like, is this going to be a waste of your time and my time, and they communicated to you that like this is something I needed. And I think, like you were saying before, like being flexible is something critical right now.
And
for sure.
You know what, like I'm optimistic right now because it's the first time I've tried this. It's the first time I've been made aware of like an eye as an option in the BCPS policy. And you know, we're going to see what happens. Like short term, I want to try it, see what happens.
Not sure we've ever done it this way. So like,
right. And evaluate later.
Yeah.
So it might be exactly what you guys are worried about, but for right now, let's find out.
Yeah, I just wanted to open that conversation of just like, if you look at it from a different perspective. Yep. So, but I mean, the hope is definitely warm and fuzzy in that the kids see the opportunity and take it. But like you said, we'll have to sit back and watch. Did we want to start looking like even further into the future and discussing maybe long-term goals?
Absolutely.
There we go.
Joe, what was the long-term goal you just brought up? Let's delve into that.
Oh gosh, so the long-term goal that I had just brought up was from episode 29, and it kind of focused on overhauling the curriculum. So we more or less give students the opportunity to choose the program they want to be in. So it seemed like there were 2 different schools or 2 different students who were talking about an experience like this. One said they started off their high school experience, they came in, they chose a more project-based path, and as they went down that project-based path, they went on to a full international baccalaureate experience. So they got a lot out of their education, they had a lot of really good things to say about how it had greatly benefited them, and they were doing what they wanted to do. They didn't feel like they were wasting their time. They were just more or less enjoying school, and they felt like they were enjoying learning. So I feel like he had more of that love for learning instilled in him, as opposed to, hey, we just need to do this for testing. But I think giving students the option to choose could be a really powerful tool. And especially now, I mean, if we're thinking about remote and hybrid learning, there's no reason that a Windsor Mill student has to join my class. There's no reason that a kid from Perry Hall Middle can't sign in and interact with my students. Like, it's just all you got to do is give them the join code. There's no barrier there. It's just sign in. And I'm not advocating that everyone go to the best teacher, but it couldn't hurt to bring in some outside perspective. Like, I know one thing that my students have always struggled with is they think that their school is the way that school is. You know, the the way that they may interact with teachers and their peers and the possible disruptions or lack thereof, versus when you go to another school you see a very different experience. And I think we can give them that experience now very easily and say, hey, let's get the perspective of other schools, as well as possibly change the curriculum up, give you a little bit more choice, and really engage students in a way that they want to be engaged instead of needing to be engaged.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of overhauling a curriculum, and again, this goes back, it's a good thing we started off with this whole Weijie thing, because it all just really comes back to that, like, of why do we have to have our curriculum this way, and why does it have to be this way when it's not working for the situation that we're currently in? And it's a super long-term goal. So at Windsor Mill, we recently became an international baccalaureate school, and we're in year 3 or 4, and it's still a growing process. But I really liked it at our school because it has changed the way that we teach at our school. It does focus on giving choice to children. It does put them in real world scenarios to make them think and use certain skills. But I don't know why it is just at our school. Like, why does that train of education have to be a magnet? Why is that not provided? And going to what Joe was just saying, why can't a kid log into my class right now and get an IB education, even though they're in a different part of the county? Because that would be equitable, is having access to these things, but instead it's just Windsor Mill kids or just whoever's in the magnet program. But so there could be a total overhaul and some sort of educational change and shift in Baltimore County if we started working on curriculum to change how we've been doing it for the last however many years at this point.
So this is really interesting. I kind of feel like this is actually two-pronged in a way. There's the idea that why do we need our curriculums to be focused around standards and creating, small little tests along the way for all of the standards when it could just be project-based. And I feel like maybe one long-term goal is offering more project-based curriculums and project-based course options for the English student who wants to write a research paper and spend the whole school year studying and learning their content in order to write a research paper. That would be super interesting versus the current curriculum we have. So there could be that total redesign of the way the curriculums are sort of organized, not around standards and standardized testing, but around maybe projects or something like that. And I think the other thing that you guys have sort of magically created is this idea that why do we have to have a physical location for classes? You were talking about being intellectual, I'm totally butchering that, international baccalaureate, and giving the opportunities for a kid at Owings Mills to go to an international baccalaureate science class or something, which could easily be done through like video conferencing or hybrid learning where you have students video in to the class. Can we imagine for a minute if ESOL students didn't have to bus an hour from where they live in the county to my school for the ESOL program?
Like, why is that not something why?
Why aren't we using technology and the ability to do these video classes to take that physical distance and travel time of an hour to school and an hour back from school? Our school starts at 7:20 in the morning when we're in physical school. Kids are getting up on the bus at 6:20 in the morning, which means they're way awake before I'm awake to go to work.
Yeah.
And then they're busing home at 2:30, 2:50. I'm forgetting. It's been a really long time since we've been in physical school. And heaven forbid they want to do a sport.
Right, and they're not getting home now till dark, and then they still have homework, still have whatever.
Why can't we be more locally focused, but provide those services, those special services that students need to bridge the divide of ESOL or, you know, one-on-one special education tutoring or whatever it is that a student needs by filling in some of those gaps with the virtual, like,
Yeah.
hybrid environment, the virtual environment that we've already created. Like, oh, I now want virtual hybrid learning when we go back. That's something I really want right now.
Yeah, no, because imagine the reduction in stress and everything. Like if those kids could just stay home sometimes and get the same experience or close to the same experience virtually, and then, or at least maybe they don't come every day, something like where you're trying to meet them where they're at rather than forcing them to go and do something that we have created for them.
And like,
Or like,
what about all the students who online learning works better for them? I mean, I feel
Right.
like it's more of my independent learners, but I've got plenty of quiet kids who normally wouldn't say much in class who are super participatory because they can use the chat feature. You know, they can do that, or they can participate in Desmos and they can ask me, "Hey, can you check my work?" and they can get that instantaneous feedback that maybe they'd be a little bit too nervous to ask in class. So I feel like having that choice really would benefit students just overall. Like just
Yeah.
giving them that option of, do you want these services or not? They could pick and choose what they need, work with teachers who are going to best meet their needs. And I mean, it's a big change, but it's not like we're not in a position to do it.
We are totally in the opportunity area of crisis right now. Long term, why not reevaluate the physical requirements of school?
in
Fascinating.
in the same breath, because I wanted to talk about one long-term goal that I think will be critical going forward is while they obviously I agree with everything we just said involving choice, like our students will still need that collaborative piece, and that's what I think I've been missing the most. And I've tried to create similar scenarios where they can collaborate, but virtually it just seems like the kids there's a disconnect when it comes to collaboration that you don't get in a physical room.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I try and get them to work together, sometimes they don't really talk, they don't communicate with each other. And but what I got from Silver Lining was the one of the professors was saying like cognitive needs will simply not be enough for our kids to thrive. If we only support them academically, we only support them in their academic growth, it won't happen because the social needs of our students won't be met. And they were discussing how the deepest of learning happens when you collaborate. And I mean, as adults right now in this conversation, in the last 45 minutes or however long, I feel like we've had a deep conversation and a better understanding of what we're talking about because we are collaborating. And I think our students are missing that deep, complex learning by not having collaboration. So, as a long term goal, I think schools and our district really need to start thinking about how are we going to get kids to still meet those collaborative and those social needs in virtual learning and hybrid learning.
So here's a thought, because I really like what you're saying, but genuinely my big issue is time. Like I think
Right.
for my lower classes, when I'm teaching pre-algebra, that's a type of class that I can teach you the skill in 5 to 10 minutes, and I can break you off into groups and you can practice. You know, the work can be chunked into 5 to 10 minute instructional pieces. I can give them time to practice or to collaborate to do whatever, and then pull them back in and try and do something else. For my higher level students like algebra, that's a bit more challenging just because the topics are more high level and they just take a little bit longer than 5 minutes overall to teach. My thought, based on what you're saying, is maybe instead of doing independent work time, we give the kids collaborative work time for that half an hour. So like
And
the
yeah,
teacher
oh,
stays in the class with them and just says, okay, you know, now we're going to break off into breakout groups, or now we're going to do whatever. You guys have to work with one another to complete this assignment.
that could be an amazing idea, and it's so simple too. And so it could be a short term situation too that we could just do something small at least.
Absolutely. And I feel like there's been an emphasis on the social emotional learning this year. Baltimore County's been pretty darn good about providing teachers trainings and strategies for creating social emotional learning environments. But the Silver Linings podcast mentioned the idea that social media is where students are most comfortable technology wise, right? And how that's where their collaboration, that's where their communication, that's where their social environment is happening, is on social media. And the idea could be that we move those social emotional practices into the social media environment, and maybe being more purposeful or creative with using social media for sort of like that collaboration piece and getting them to talk with maybe not even just their classmates, but people at different schools who are also taking the same class. And maybe that would be a more authentic and real world and even higher level application for the students, because they already have the basis foundation of making Instagram posts and communicating with people on Twitter. Now, of course, that comes with so many uncontrollables and so many like problems with social media. The Silver Linings podcast mentioned the spread of false information being a major concern, but
I still think that's awesome though, because you're right. Like if I tell my kids, "Hey, do a 2 to 3 sentence quick write," they're like, "What?" But if I'm like, "Hey, comment on this person's post," they'd be like, "Oh yeah, I could do that like that." And
right.
so I think that's awesome. In terms of social media too, I loved what they discussed in because I think what you're saying could also fill this purpose is we assumed that students knew how to use social media and they don't all the time. They're very good at it, but not how to behave on social media all the time. Because, and they said it in the podcast, is that parents hide their social media from their kids, so they don't show them how to use it. And then teachers, we kind of just say it's bad and that's it. And instead of using the opportunity to show this is how you should project yourself on social media, here's the things you should post, and this is how you should write it, and things like that. So I like your idea of instead of shunning social media and saying it's this bad thing that we don't want to use, instead, again, Weiji, embrace it, use it as a tool, and use it for our kids and meet them again equitably where they're at. And where they're at is most of the time social media.
No, I agree.
Model and teach them how to use it responsibly and
yeah, well, also like you said, as an educational tool.
And I mean, something that was brought up in episode 29, and something that we've experienced a lot, I'm sure, is that not only can we teach the kids, but the kids can teach us.
every day.
So,
yeah.
like, the way you would interact with someone in a Twitch chat versus the way you would interact with someone in a Discord, group versus how you would interact with someone on Twitter is going to be very different. And I think the kids understand a lot of this. Not all of them do, but the kids, they do understand a lot of the, unwritten rules about social media. And I feel like they have quite a bit to teach us as well.
Absolutely.
I agree with you. But I don't think they maybe understand using or the unwritten rules of social media for like professional and job environments.
Yes.
I mean, look at any of our students' pages right now, we'd all be like, "Oh, why is that on there?" Like,
but I think that's getting even increasingly more important. Just look at our grad class. The reason we are doing this assignment to begin with, I had to make a Twitter account. I never had a Twitter account ever. I never wanted a Twitter account. Before a class assignment told me to go to Twitter and interact with Twitter, and I was very, very lost of what to write, how to say it, how to communicate. Should I use punctuation? Because social media doesn't use punctuation, but this is a professional environment, therefore punctuation is required.
Right. And you're an adult.
I'm an adult.
But it's like texting. It's like, I feel like it's kind of individual to the person. Like, if you're formal with texting, you can use proper grammar and capitalization, but then it's also just as appropriate for some people to not.
Which is fantastic. I think my point was more that with the digital divide and social media being a part of the future and job opportunities and professionalism, we're probably doing our students a disservice by just saying technology's or social media is bad. Don't misbehave on social media instead of
But what does that mean?
working with it.
Like,
Yeah.
why is it bad, or what am I doing? Like, do we just say it's bad and not explaining, hey, when a job goes to look at this and you have middle fingers up and whatever, that it, and that doesn't click for them. And again, one teacher saying it or one adult in their life saying it. So I just feel like the social emotional learning could be used in that. Educational opportunities could be used with social media. And then a byproduct is also just we happen to teach our kids how to use it.
Maybe an extra long-term goal, that one.
Yeah, right.
Oh no, my camera got frozen.
Oh no. I hope it's a beautiful face. I'm sure it is.
Probably not.
But that is the possible downfall. That is the trouble with streaming services.
Oh yes.
Also, I think it's really cool that we did not intentionally mean to use Twitch as a sort of like way to do this vodcast, and yet like, hey, we're using social media to talk about education like cool people.
That just
Not
happened.
intentional. Not intentional.
Practice what we're preaching.
Cool. Yeah.
So
I think there is one more long-term goal we should probably quickly discuss, and that is the need for improving our digital security.
obviously,
Just in general, after getting hit with this ransomware, from what I've heard through the grapevine, BCPS was partially warned that that there were flaws in our security overall. And I don't think we were directly warned that there was going to be a ransomware attack, but knowing that there were flaws in the security and knowing this was our method of delivering instruction kind of put all our eggs in a basket and then just left the basket out to be stolen.
additionally, and then just like people's data and like being at risk, and not just like our data like bank accounts, but like student data and just all of that. And I mean, that's already very much mined at this point by Google and everything, and everyone's data is everywhere. But you would have thought that there would have been an emphasis to protect that, knowing we were going into this virtual experience. And definitely in the future needs to be worked on, because again, if this is something that is going to happen at least for this school year, possibly into the next, we can't have interruptions like this frequently, or else everything as we know as teachers, consistency is everything. And so when you have this kind of situation, it really ruins everything that you kind of built for the last 2.5 months with your kids.
Absolutely. I agree with that for sure. I think maybe the only thing I would have to add to that is another thing that we could do is with improving digital security is helping students understand why it's important and how to do it, and get them to be conscious and responsible with their personal information, and with maybe not downloading random things off the internet onto their school devices for the security risk of it.
Right. I think
maybe that's
sorry, go ahead.
Short term. Is that a short term more goal of like helping our students, be responsible in that way? But I don't know.
No, again, I was doing the same thing, kind of the social media thing, is that I don't think they understand, like, hey, when you download this is what it does. And they, like, I know a lot of my students, like, they give their passwords out to their friends and stuff. So it's just like, they don't understand, by being very not secure with their stuff, the impact that could have on their technology. And then moving forward as adults, same thing. You don't give out your bank account information. You don't, like, and teaching them by modeling it through school, I think, again, could be beneficial for society.
At the very least, communicating about it, back
Yeah.
to that communication piece.
Absolutely.
Well, we are at least an hour at this point. I feel like we've talked about, if not all of the topics we wanted to touch on, we really delved into some good stuff here. So
We did. It was a good discussion.
Yeah. Thank you guys for joining me today for this.
Definitely learned
Yes.
some things and have things to think about. So
Yeah, I just hope maybe people at the higher level are having similar conversations about education and where we could go is my hope. I guess long term is that we're not the only ones, or I hope that this conversation is something that continues. It's not a moment; it's momentum towards something different. Anybody? No?
I like that.
I like it. I like it. So we've got WAGE, opportunity and crisis as our motto at the beginning, and we're ending with this motto of not a moment, it's momentum. I like it.
Cool.
With a very consistent theme of communication. I would say communication was brought up in every single category, so yes. Which is
Okay.
funny because that's something I feel like we talk about in person too.
Absolutely. So it's obviously something important. We're talking about it in virtual, we're talking about it when we're in the building. So definitely something we need to focus on moving forward.
Well, great. Let's sign off to all of our Twitch fans. And special shout out to EdTech680 from Loyola University. See you guys soon.
All right. Later, Twitch.
Peace out, guys.